Hello my friends, it's the 4th of October 2016, Mr. Max Bliss in the southwest of France. And pilots get illnesses from flying called aerotoxic syndrome. Now I've found documentation to prove that aluminium nanoparticles are added into jet fuels. These are impeccably reliable sources, and they have been for quite some time. Aluminium nanoparticles are linked to Alzheimer's, to various different neurological conditions, which one could reasonably state would be aerotoxic syndrome. So, as the days go by, as the years go by, and more pilots are realising that the air they breathe, or have been breathing, in aircraft is not safe for long-term exposure. This is why, unfortunately, pilots and cabin crew, frequent flyers, the whole issue of aerotoxic syndrome will begin to become more of a conscious concern for your welfare. As time goes by, more and more people are going to start having problems. But you know what? This whole thing about chemtrails, totally denied, isn't it? Totally silly, they say. However, I have certainly found out so much information now that yes, they are adding sulfur to the fuel. Yes, they are adding aluminium nanoparticles to the fuel, and have been for many years. Yes, they are adding barium. Yes, they are adding chromium. Yes, they are adding all sorts of different metals to the fuels, and these are used in a similar way to commercial cloud seeding operations. This is why we're seeing much more ice crystals in the atmosphere. These are just harmless ice crystals. Well, I can assure you that is the entire goal, to produce ice crystals. Now here's the thing that most people are yet to become aware of. Partly cloudy days, especially this artificial partly cloudy day that's been created here because of aviation flying through our atmosphere. This actually intensifies UV exposure by up to 1.5 times. That's why these days when you're outside on a partly cloudy day, you can be sunburnt, you can put your hand from the shade into the direct sun on a partly cloudy day, and you can feel the intensity that's noticeably more powerful than it used to be when we were growing up, especially for people that have worked outside all their lives, like myself. You're very tuned in and aware of what it's like to be outside. You can notice the difference today. So pilots, you're going to carry on getting sick, I'm sorry to say. You should wake up. You are in a position to observe the skies and realise we are being warmed up. We are getting regional warming because of the shortwave radiation that is intensified, and the long-wave radiation, the infrared heat from the things that are heated up, like metals, like asphalt, like roofs, like concrete. Those are being heated up far faster than normal because of these chemtrail days, or contrail days, persistent contrails. And that in turn, the shape of these ice crystals is actually trapping in that infrared heat. So you've got a double effect there. You've got the intensification of various different rays coming from the sun because of MEI scattering. MEI scattering actually intensifies the electrical energy, the electromagnetic energy, such as UV radiation. And then you're getting things heated up at the surface, and that heated up more than they should be, And this, in turn, is releasing infrared radiation, long-wave radiation, and that is being trapped in by this thin layer of clouds, which are actually intensifying this UV radiation. And this is temporary regional warming. It's also charging the atmosphere electronically. It's changing the thermal dynamics. It's changing the moisture. It's completely altering the cloud physics. And this has been long understood. This is by design. Putting all these ice crystals in the atmosphere goes back to some of the work done by Harry Wexler on the possibilities of weather control. One of his suggestions to deliberately warm the Arctic was to use a series of detonations of nuclear bombs to create a load of ice crystals in the atmosphere. Ice crystals being the focus of warming the atmosphere. That's correct. Now, sometimes when I'm looking at the sky, I can see little wavy patterns that have a clear stimulation in the atmosphere. Now, I don't know if they'll come out. Sometimes it's very difficult to pick it out with a camera, but if you observe the sky, you can begin to see them. Now, all of this, what we could see in the sky today, is purely here because of aviation. There is no other reason. If the planes are grounded like they were following 9/11 in the US, they were grounded for 4 days, and what happened was the skies began to clear immediately, and for all those days that the planes were grounded, the US had blue skies, because basically a very significantly large amount of cloud cover that is created in modern times is because of aviation, i.e. just look at the sky. These these ice crystals not only create this contrail cirrus clouds, but those ice crystals are known to survive falling and seed lower cloud decks. So therefore it can be used in different ways. It can be used to overseed, to create drought, to stop it from raining. And it can be used to seed so that you can create rain in a controlled way. So what we're realizing now is all the studies would suggest, and the historical documentation would suggest, it was widely understood that contrails can be used for weather modification purposes, that in fact they are now being deliberately created and triggered and stopped and deployed in particular reasons, as per recent NASA documentation I have found that came from 1974, explaining very clearly how they deliberately worked out the best flight patterns to get maximum coverage of the sky deliberately. And now we can look at the changes to flight corridors and correlate those with established weather fronts and so on to see that today's air corridors are deliberately designed with markers to create these corridors so that they get the maximum coverage when they decide that that's what they're going to be doing. This is without a doubt it's a global program, obviously with NATO at the spear point, but these days geopolitical leverage, all the countries are involved to do with the United Nations, really. There's certainly at different levels. Obviously where planes fly more, this is more important because we've got more traffic, but just have a look at the sky. This is having a huge impact. This is well known now, and it has been since the 50s and 60s that contrails warm a region. This is not benevolent solar radiation management. This is deliberate, covert, and in brackets, blatant weather and climate modification over a long period. This is global. This is a worldwide weather control program, just as JFK talked about in 1961 on the 25th September at the United Nations General Assembly. JFK stated that all nations would work together to accurately predict and one day control the weather. Well, numerous presidents have felt that this was a very paramount important issue. I've since learned that the Soviets and the US and all their allies have been working together on this as a joint program since the 60s at the recommendation of JFK. And partly that was to try and melt the Arctic, and then overall it's to covertly control the weather. And why do we find that that is of complete relevance today? Because of the climate change, global warming alarmism that's being used to manufacture public consent for the uptake of carbon taxes, of a bigger agenda of sustainable development and ending fossil fuel use, because CO2 has been incorrectly assigned as pollution. Has been demonised as a terrible thing, when in actual fact it's a life-giving, a vital trace gas that makes all plants and trees and so on live, thrive and survive. Without it we'd all see catastrophe on this planet. CO2 is our friend, it is not our enemy. Very important to realise the ridiculous double talk, the way that they've spun this around and trying to demonise CO2, and then actually it is absolutely vital. But what we know now is that there is a geopolitical agenda, and the threat of global warming, as the Club of Rome has written about, is being used to manufacture consent, to unify nations with this invented threat so they can create global governance. They want a one world government system, and they need our acquiescence. They need us to surrender and capitulate to the United Nations, which will provide the framework for a one world government system, global governance, globalization, interrelated interdependencies, interrelated partnerships and all this sort of thing. But basically we're looking at the oligarchy, the banksters, those that own and set up all the corporation system to create these super monopolies. They're looking for the final takeover of all resources, of all nations, and they actually want to frighten us sufficiently that we're supposed to actually demand it. We're supposed to go, oh my God, the climate's got serious problems and it's all man-made. It's our own fault. We should feel so guilty about it. We should change the way we live. But the truth is they've been manipulating our climate. They've been deliberately using large-scale weather modification, including the use of contrails and electromagnetic technology. They can trigger earthquakes, they can trigger volcano eruptions, they can move the jet streams, they can couple energy from the ionosphere down to the troposphere for the purposes of creating electric fields in the atmosphere for weather modification. In fact, contrails and contrail series alter the charges in the atmosphere, which they've learnt to manipulate because they're using the global electric circuit. It's very complex, but the more research you do, the more you'll begin to understand the longevity, the incredible importance placed on the research and development of weather and climate modification over the years, and how that has been switched to this global warming climate change agenda so that they can manufacture public consent for this global governance that they want to create, for this one world government system. You can find out all the information you need, my friends. You can find it all out. It is all out there. But it only works by keeping everyone deceived, by keeping everyone ignorant. The more we research, the more we find out, the more we share, we begin to change the paradigm. We begin to lift the veil of mass deception. And that's what we've got to do, my friends. We've got to research, we've got to verify, we've got to provide that information, we've got to inform ourselves so we can inform others. because that's what's going to make the change. Already things are changing. The climate change agenda is falling apart. It's a pack of lies. As in most of the agendas to do with a new world order, just a pack of lies. And it just relies on everyone being ignorant. But people are not remaining ignorant. People are educating themselves, and they are sharing that information and inspiring other people to want to educate themselves. And the information is out there, my friends. So please do all you can. Inform yourself so you can inform others. And just talk to people. Anywhere, at any time. Just sow some seeds and get people looking up at the sky and looking up for information, and just sow that seed, get them curious, because that's all it takes, my friends. That's all it takes, because there's enough information out there. Once people begin to get hungry, once they start to see how much we've all been lied to, once they begin to observe the sky and realise that's not normal, that's a new normal. It's crept in over the last few decades, it's true. But the use of this technology is obvious once your eyes are opened. Take care, my friends. Bye for now.